right. We will begin today's session, today's dance projects info session. So first of all, thank you very much for joining us. My name is Tafiya Itiaba-Bayah. Tafiya Itiaba-Bayah. I'm a Afro-Caribbean male. I am wearing glasses, a brown sweater, and I have very, very, very short hair with dark skin. I'd like to give thanks to all of you joining today's session. And I'd also like to give thanks to our ASL interpretation for today, which is done by Alex and Amanda. So thank you to Alex and Amanda for providing us this support today. It's much appreciated. We'd like to acknowledge that we are on stolen land. We are settlers and we are visitors who've been allowed to take part in caring for this land by the indigenous peoples who inhabit Turtle Island, which we call Toronto, known as Toronto. So that being said, Toronto Arts Council respectfully acknowledges and honors the diversity of the indigenous peoples who are the native stewards of this land, who have cared for it before us and passed their wisdom down through generations. And we're lucky to be able to operate on this land. We're lucky to be able to dance on this land, make art on this land. We honor the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit of the First Nation, and many who've walked over this land and taken care of it before us and before we touched this land. So as a settler myself and a dancer and an artist on this land, giving thanks to the indigenous peoples that came before me, that were stewards that had their land taken from them and forcibly forced to share this with other people and now operate within different territories. So my name is Tafiya. Once again, I'm the dance program manager at Toronto Arts Council. I go by he, they pronouns. Along with us today, once again, we have ASL interpretation by Alex and Amanda, as well as support from our grant admin, magician extraordinaire, Joyce, who's in the background helping to set up the chat, answer questions, and set things up as well. So thank you to Joyce. As I said before, this information session is going to be recorded and put on YouTube or our website for later usage. So if you miss something, don't worry about it. You can always view it again later. We do have a chat function. Feel free to use it while we are operating within this info session. In addition to that, we do have a Q&A function. So if things come up, you can ask questions. And when we get to the Q&A at the end of the info session, I might be able to look through and see what some of your questions are if they haven't been asked, or you can possibly be unmuted and ask a live question. All right. So I'm just going to check the chat. Yes. All right. So we will get started. So first of all, this info session is to give an overview and an understanding of Toronto Arts Council's dance projects, and as well as the funding process within it. As the dance program manager, what my role is to facilitate the process of artists applying for funding. I sometimes talk to and work with operating organizations, and also I connect with external organizations who are also sometimes doing things within Toronto Arts, so we can all enrich the Toronto arts environment. So the Toronto Arts Council is a nonprofit organization under contract to the City of Toronto. We are not the City of Toronto, but we do work closely with the City of Toronto. We have a sibling organization called Toronto Arts Foundation, which deals more with donations as well as arts awards and other functions of working with people within the city to support the arts. So overall, though, our mission is to support artists and arts organizations with what we call responsive and innovative granting programs. So responsive, meaning that we're constantly engaging with artists in the community. And then innovative is that when we hear different things, we're able to act on them slowly through processes and make changes so that gradually over time, you see a fluid change or shift in the way that we operate that reflects the communities that we live in. So, first of all, What exactly are grants? I remember when I was a lot younger in my arts journey, and I had never even heard of a grant. I didn't even know it was a thing. And I wish that somebody told me about it when I had started. And then eventually, when I found out what a grant was, I was baffled. I had no idea I could apply for help to run an arts project. So now that I'm in this position, I love to share the process of what a grant is and how they come into being and what the process is to receive one, or even how it works. So a grant is a sum of money that artists or people can apply to funding bodies for to help support their cool arts projects that they want to do. In this specific case, we're talking about TAC's dance projects funding. So other funding bodies you could also apply to for programming or for support for your programming is Ontario Arts Council and Canada Council for the Arts. And there are several smaller ones in between, right, that people in different cities around the world apply to. A major topic that I wanted to bring up as we start this info session is about risk management. It's a very underutilized topic. Underutilized because it is useful to people to talk about and to help shape your mindset when applying for funding. Risk management refers to the threshold that you are comfortable putting out there in terms of both success and being unsuccessful in an application. So risk tolerance is the perfect wording. Risk tolerance refers to the amount of loss that you can handle when you're making an investment. Although people might not be aware of it, when you're applying for funding for an arts project, you're making an investment. Sometimes it's time, it's blood, sweat, tears, you're writing these applications, and it takes a toll on you. So when you apply for funding, you're investing time and energy into writing a proposal, gathering support material, reaching out to other community members so that you can garner support and see if you can make a project a reality. And other times, you already have your own money invested in a project. And sometimes we don't realize it, but if we don't have a proper risk management mindset when we're applying for grants or funding, then we're actually gambling. Gambling referring to you have no other support for how you can make the project happen, and you're only hoping that you can receive this bit of funding to make something happen. Now, there are some projects that really do need support, and you may wonder, well, where else would I get that level of money or funding from? But it's also important to remember that as we engage further in our artistic processes, we have to take more time to think carefully about how we spend our energy. Otherwise, we burn out. So the projects we want to do can be very beautiful, they can be very time consuming, and they can be very demanding. And so when we consider risk management and our risk tolerance as we apply for funding and in our granting processes, then we start to be able to take care of ourselves better, be able to understand what are the supports we can garner and what are the ways we can shape our mindset when we're applying to funding. So your previous success or your lack of success in past applications does not dictate future results. Each application is ranked as each application, and we can't be too sure what's going to happen in the future, but we do put our best foot forward to apply the best that we can today. So Toronto's granting system and Toronto's arts community is very competitive. It's filled with many amazing artists who have brilliant ideas, innovative ideas, things that make people feel so much and represent so many communities. So it can be quite challenging, especially in 2025. It's important in all of the grants that you apply to, whether it's Toronto Arts Council, Ontario Arts Council, or Canada Arts Council, that you have a solid contingency plan. Contingency plan allows us to think about how the project could still occur even if you are not successful in your grant application, causes you to maybe slow down, think about how can the project be broken apart into separate pieces. And it also helps us to question, does this all have to happen at once? And how much of this load am I taking on? Am I being kind to myself? Am I being kind to others in the process, right? An additional question I wanted to put there was, what resources are available to me to help execute some of these other aspects of the project? How would I fundraise the necessary amount without the grant? Some people, maybe they do dance-a-thons. Other people, they might do intensives to raise money. Other people might do series of performances. So everyone has different methods. Additionally, reach out to your communities and brainstorm. I think that collectively we can all come up with ways to create better risk management systems and talk about risk tolerance in a granting perspective, because grants and the granting system are also a privileged area. Many other countries don't necessarily have this resource. I just want to share that and I want to say, so now, thank you very much. Let's get into it. So TAC's dance grants, we have in dance project section, we have different categories. We have creation, when you're making new work, you're researching, you're trying to find something innovative, but you have a base idea. We have production and presentation, when you maybe have an idea that you'd like to really prepare and develop to share, or maybe you have an event that you're ready to produce that's going to showcase dancing and push everything forward. We have series and festivals where maybe we are celebrating dance and we're showcasing across multiple venues, could be outside, multiple days. And we have dance field development, which allows collectives specifically or organizations to host workshops or intensives that boost specific genres or movements across the city and offer professional development and training opportunities. So for example, if you are, I saw flamenco in the chat, let's say you are part of a collective or organization and you really want to hold a flamenco intensive, you might want to apply to our dance field development to boost the level of flamenco in the city, or maybe you can share innovative methods, or it's an experimental flamenco intensive where you have some alternatives. Aside from that, within the dance category, we also do annual operating funding for organizations, and we also have multi-year operating funding for organizations. Each category also has different maximum amounts that you can apply for. As a note, Toronto Arts Council only will fund the creation category at 100% of your maximum. What this means is the max for creation category is $10,000. If you apply for creation-based grants, if you are successful and you applied for 10,000, it is possible for you to receive 100% of your ask if it seems reasonable. The other categories, so production and presentation, series and festivals, dance field development, all of them, we do not fund at 100% of your ask, because it's implied that there should be other sources of funding that you're also sourcing to make sure that the projects are happening. Or alternatively, just so everybody knows, we usually do what we call the base funding amount, which means we don't fund any less than about 75 to 80%. So it could be anywhere between 80 to 85 is the typical amount that we'll fund, 80 to 85% of the ask in all these other three categories. But we never want to fund any less than about 75%. That's because it doesn't make sense for some of these projects and it's not fair to the people applying. So now, how do we even apply for grants? This is something I had no idea about. I heard about grants when I was younger, but I had no idea how to even start. So here's a tangible. First, you can go to our website at torontoartscouncil.org. You can pick a category or arts discipline. In this case, it's dance. You can decide on the subcategory. Think about, what would you like to do? Is it creation? Would you like to do production and presentation? Is it dance field development? Is it series and festivals? At the top of that page, in that dance project section, we do have our guidelines, which updates usually every year. So please read the guidelines, all right? And once you do, you can kind of understand what certain eligibility requirements are and maybe which one your project might be a good fit for. But regardless, you can always contact me or program manager, and we can have a conversation about maybe which area might be the best fit for your idea. Now, reread the guidelines because sometimes there's a lot of information in there. And sometimes people email, but they don't realize that, oh, the answer was totally in there. But I don't mind emailing back because usually it leads me into interesting conversations where I get to hear a little bit deeper about how people are thinking and what's important to their projects. So after we've gone through this process, then you can apply through our Smart Simple portal. So the page is down there. It's www.tac.smartsimple.ca. And it's a granting online system where you're able to see what's available to apply for, and you're able to literally type in parts of these applications. And I have examples of these applications or photos of some of these pages available in this slide. Before we get into that, I want to talk about accessibility and support within this granting process when you think about applying. So for artists that self-identify as deaf and disabled, we do have application accessibility support. This is a $500 assistance, which allows them to apply for service providers that can help them write their applications or maybe translate things over. So it could be ASL interpretation, it could be grant writing assistance, could be help navigating the online system and different things like that. We do offer just a $500 maximum, which is billable to us, but that is only if you contact the program manager. What we like to do is we like to say, please make sure you contact the program manager a minimum of 6 weeks before the application is due, and provide the name, the email, and the phone number of the service provider so that we can contact them. And I usually ask for an invoice and I send them some paperwork as well. For more information, you can visit our accessibility support page, torontoartscouncil.org, grant programs, application accessibility support. And Joyce should drop it in the chat as well. So here are some examples, as I mentioned before, of our certain eligibility requirements. Considering that we are Toronto Arts Council, the projects that we fund are Toronto-based, and we like to fund Toronto-based artists, and that is our priority. So Toronto-based artists are professional artists who've been living in the city of Toronto for a minimum of 1 year prior to the deadline. They have a history of public presentation. They've been paid for their work. What that means is if you've done a show and you've received payment for that, that is being paid for your work, right? So Canadian citizens, permanent residents, or you have an application pending for permanent resident status, you're a protected person, refugee claimant, right? So individual applicants that are not enrolled in high school or an undergraduate degree in a university setting. But for graduate students, we do allow them to apply, provided that the projects they want to do aren't related to their university work or their thesis. Additionally, for people that have applied before, we want to make sure that when they apply to new funding, they've completed their older projects. So no overdue final reports or ongoing projects. We have a minimum of 1 grant per year for the general categories. And then we offer the additional support or the additional grant for artists that apply or qualify within the Black Arts Program and the Indigenous Arts Program. If you'd like the full list of eligibility requirements, it's in the dance project guidelines, which is on our project page or programs page. So now, writing the actual grant, there's a lot of things to think about. And I think that when people start to approach writing the grant, they sometimes get overwhelmed because they have a great initial idea, but they don't know how to word it and they don't know how to talk about it. I've written on this slide some of the questions that come up in the grant application. These are very standard questions. For example, what is your artistic mission? So you personally or your collective, whoever is applying, what is your artistic mission? Like, what do you want to do for this project? Think about, is it filling a need? Who's involved in it? Where will the project happen? When does it take place? What's the budget, right? Are people being paid fairly, especially for their time, energy, especially within dancing, utilizing the body? Do you have any previous work that helps support you when you're applying for any of this? Do you have any previous work that you can showcase in support material that shows directly that you have capacity, that you've been experimenting, or maybe in process work? What can you use as support material? Contingency plan, right? As we mentioned before. So here's an example of an application page, right? Usually looks like this. There are different sections. So as you can see on the screen, this is what Smart Simple looks like. It's a very straightforward looking system, but it can be a little bit hard to use. Although it's called Smart Simple, we often joke and we say it's neither smart nor simple. It's a bit challenging at times, but that's why we offer this capacity to communicate, especially for new people who just sign up and register. All right. So within the grant application, we have different sections like self-identification, your ID, your budget, if you have accessibility expenses, support material, and then a bunch of internal fields and things like that, which is what I have to worry about after you apply. All right. So in the page that's in front of us is just a project description page or a fraction, a small piece of this project description page where it's asking about your project goals. Every section in a grant application on Smart Simple has a word count or a word limit. So some sections are 1,000 words, some sections are 500. You don't have to complete the whole 1,000 words, so you don't have to try to fill it up. If you get your point across in 500 words, but the word count or the word limit is 1,000, that's completely fine. Just because you have a lengthy area or text box doesn't mean you have to use it all. Sometimes less is more if you can get to the point quicker. Here's another page I wanted to provide an example of. On the screen is a quick example of our budget section. So in this area, there's additional boxes where when you click on the budget icon, it allows you to go in and fill in a bunch of other areas and sections. For example, if you've received donations, if you're anticipating ticket sales, how much do you think you would make before that? Have you applied to other funding at OAC or Canada Council? If so, how much did you apply for? What are you gonna pay the artists? What's the total amount? What are you paying people for admin? How are you setting up this project? Right? Things like that all go in the expenses section. And then also, it's important to include a budget breakdown. So if you give a number in your budgeting section, it's okay in the budget breakdown to explain how you came to that number. And the more realistic these numbers are, the more that the people assessing your application can be able to say, oh, okay, that makes sense. Why this much? Why this costs this much? Or how you're thinking about breaking down your payments. This is an example or a photo of our support material page. This is where people can provide audio or visual support material. So if you have videos of yourself dancing or the people involved in the project dancing, this is where you might put them because it's related to your application. Maybe it helps you showcase work you've already done. Maybe it helps showcase an iteration of the work you're applying to do and how you want to expand it. The point is that the support material gives the jury members or the panel an idea of where you're at, or maybe where you've been, or maybe what you're in process of. And the support material is supposed to help boost your application and showcase what's going on. What are you feeling and what are you thinking? And how do you explore dance? How do you explore your work? Often people will put finished pieces and sections of finished pieces, and that's completely great. And sometimes people put process work, and that's completely great too. So support material is a very diverse section. You can include photos of past work, or you can include videos. So there's a lot of options there for people. So on the accessibility and support as well, we do have another accessibility expense section within these grant applications for artists that identify as deaf and disabled. In these sections, we offer the opportunity for them to add in any external or additional resources they might need, and they're applying for an additional maximum. So if the creation category has a $10,000 cap, then whatever is being applied for within the accessibility expenses is on top of your asked amount. And this could include maybe you need help getting to and from the studio during rehearsals due to chronic illness or maybe mobility challenges, depending on the season, things like that. And these costs are also broken down in a similar document as the one mentioned in the budgeting section. So after applying for a grant, you hit submit, you feel relief. And then it's my role to kind of look through everything and say, okay, is everything in place? Who do I have to contact about whether they need to fix something on their application? We do checks after people finish. So after the deadline has passed, right, I do some checks, and then it's my role to, okay, gather the jury, which is made up of peers or artists in the community who have been doing the work just like you all, and we create a panel of about 4 to 5 people, different artists, who get to assess these applications. These artists have not or don't have any applications themselves in that pool. Otherwise, I can't reach out to them. It would be a conflict of interest. And after we read through the applications during an assessment, they score the applications rated 1 to 5. Now, 5 is the highest you can get, and then 1 is obviously the lowest. Within TAC, we usually believe that 3 is the neutral threshold, saying like, yeah, this project is very viable. And if there's some funding available, it would be great to apply that to it. 3.5 means, oh, okay, this project, if we have funding, it would be definitely great to share some funding with it. 4 means this project is very solid. We really want to fund it. 5 is this is an excellent, excellent project. It's very innovative. It's bringing something new. It's solid, and we should fund it. With that being said, it's a very competitive environment. And sometimes you come across different granting periods where the threshold or the minimum threshold for what we can fund is at a 4 because we have so many great applications and everyone's grants that they've submitted are at a very high level, and it's understood and we can see how they're going to impact the community. All right. So for everyone in this info session, I wanted to personally just make a granting life cycle because it's something that no one did for me. So I wanted to do it for you all. I got you. And in this info session, I really wanted to do this just so everybody knows from start to finish exactly what's happening, exactly to the point. So you don't have to question like, oh, I don't know what happened. You just applied and then you just go back to what you were doing. Here you can see this is exactly what happens, even for me on the back end. All right. So starting on the left corner of the screen for me, we release our deadlines, right? And then over a period of time, the applications open in our Smart Simple portal. Usually, you can apply for these grants 2 to 2.5 months before the deadline, about 3 sometimes. And it depends on if we're shifting guidelines and things like that. We might need more time to figure out the language that we're shifting to. After applications open in Smart Simple, like they are now, then people usually go in and they draft applications in Smart Simple, where sometimes you take a look at the questions and then you start pulling up other documents, maybe a Word document on the side, and you start thinking, how am I going to write this application? And usually people copy paste the questions over. This is when I get a lot of different calls and emails of what should I apply to? What would my project fall under? And that's all great. Please contact me about your ideas, especially if I have capacity. I do read through the emails very thoroughly, and I do respond when I have capacity very properly. All right. Then we hit the application deadline. So the next upcoming deadline is actually February 18th. So the application deadline will be on February 18th for the next dance projects application. After that, I do the post-deadline checks. So as well as with a grant admin. So Joyce would do a grant admin check for the sections that she's responsible for, and I myself would do application checks. And we have several grant admin staff who help us with this function for different arts sections. So in our visual arts, we have a grant admin staff who performs those checks and assists with the process. And for the dance projects, for the Black arts, for every section. After we do those post deadline checks, usually we send out little messages to people and we say, hey, you didn't fill in this section. What happened? And we give them some time to fix it. Or sometimes we do eligibility checks where we say, oh, so and so applied, but they have a final report that's overdue and therefore they're not eligible. Or sometimes people apply, but they didn't realize that they're still running an ongoing project. So we have to send them an email that says, hey, unfortunately, you got a grant last year and you're still in the midst of that project. So unfortunately, you're not eligible for this cycle. All right. So after we complete those checks, then it's my job to fill in some internal sections, make sure I have myself organized because that's what the challenge is often. And then I start doing outreach to the peer assessors or the jury, the panel, the people who assess the applications, the other artists in the community. And if you're wondering, like, well, how do I select the peer assessors? That's why I'm out in the community. I go to a lot of dance shows. I talk with artists constantly. I get emails. I read a lot of our final reports. And people don't realize this, but behind the scenes, as I'm in the Toronto arts community, when I go to different shows, I'm also taking notes sometimes, and I just have conversations with people, and I just make notes of who I talk to so I can keep expanding my list because I like to have diverse panels. And a lot of our grant admin and our grant programmers, we all understand that diversity is very important within our peer assessment processes. So within the dance section, we want diverse styles of dance. We want diverse backgrounds. We want diverse mindsets because that makes sure that we're not recycling the same people every time they apply, or we're also allowing emerging artists to kind of maybe get in, and that we have different perspectives from different areas of the city, different dance forms, and different communities, right? After that, when everything is solidified and I've secured my peer assessors, eventually they do some pre-reading where they read through your applications. And after that period, we get into the peer assessment where we select a few days. Sometimes it's 1 or 2, depends on how many applications we have, and we go through the applications. In that process, as the grant program manager, I have no pull or no sway on who gets funding. That is not what any of our grant program managers' roles are. what our job is to facilitate the process and make sure that you all, as artists in the community, are being respected in the process. So we're making sure that peer assessors read through your application. We're listening to their feedback and the different things that they're thinking about the applications. And we're also making note of the scores, and we're helping to organize the structure so that by the time we finish our process, we have clear results and clear thresholds of what we can fund and what we are not able to fund. Because we often have so many great projects, but we don't have enough money to fund everybody, which is often the sad part. So after these panels, the results are sent into our major staff meeting and the board, and the panel results are approved. And after a period of time, we release these results on a set date, and we send out notifications through our Smart Simple system. Then everybody receives the notifications, and you can see whether you were successful or you were unsuccessful, and you should try again for the next cycle. Now, during this period, you are able to receive feedback from program managers. So even if you're unsuccessful, you can still find out maybe what some suggestions were on your application and what you can try for next time. And I often, especially when I meet with artists who are unsuccessful, I like to give it some time so we can have a little brainstorming where I provide the anonymous jury feedback. And I also can ask the artist, oh, okay, so what were you thinking during this section? What do you want to try for next time? And I might present you with some questions to think about. Maybe you have some alternate ideas and we can bounce ideas back and forth off of each other. So if you were successful, then you're moving into your project phase. And eventually that leads to you submitting a final report, which is showcasing this is what I did, this is how it went, this is how I feel after the process, or this is how everyone was impacted, and things like that. As a side note, even if you are successful at receiving a grant, it does not mean that you can't ask for feedback. Because if you were successful, wouldn't you like to know what worked this time, especially if you weren't successful before? So I'd like to leave that with you as a thought. So, considerations. Stop waiting for others to create what's needed or relevant within your community. If you have been living, working, breathing, and existing in certain spaces and communities, and you see a need, and you've been collaborating with people, and you all understand, somebody should create this kind of program, or somebody should create this kind of showcase, or why aren't there any dance programs doing this? Or why don't we make some kind of show where people are able to dance and showcase this? Well, instead of saying somebody should, it's probably you. So you should. You don't have to wait for others to create what's needed. You have the idea, and if you're living and working in this community, you should totally do it. And if you need that support, if you need affirmation, and if you maybe need a pathway, that's what reaching out to program officers such as myself, or even sometimes just talking with others in the community is for. But please feel free to reach out to me. I am accessible via email. And then also sometimes I am accessible for in-person, depending on the season as well. But by phone is also available. So 2, secondary, projects that make big impact create with, not just for, the community. So for example, sometimes people create work or projects, and when it's collaborative, it breathes so much more life versus sometimes people make work and they think, oh, I'm gonna create this project for this community, but no one from that community asked for that project. So who benefits from that, right? So we have to consider, who are we working with? And was it done in collaboration, or was it done for, without consideration? In that case, we kind of miss the point of what we can do together and what's going to strengthen the whole community. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean to say that the projects we do can't also benefit ourselves. But there is so much more outside of us that we're taking in every day as we navigate Toronto. And within our art, we are always making impact, but we can get very specific on how we want to do that. And grants help us to do that. And third, and important point, you don't need to be perfect, and neither does the project. All right. If you are behind the screen right now and you are watching me or you are listening to me like a podcast, I want you to take a breath and you're going to repeat with me. How can I succeed if I don't allow myself to make a mistake? I'm going to say it again. You're going to try and say it with me. I trust you're saying it with me. How can I succeed if I don't allow myself to make a mistake? How would you know how to run an event if you don't try? How would you know how to create a production if you don't try? And even if you are successful and the production doesn't go as well as you think, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. Well, that's great. That means you did something different this time and you get to try it again from a different lens, more informed. And maybe later you'll be a mentor to another dancer or artist, and they're going to rely on that insight and you're going to be able to tell them how to apply for that grant, things you learned that didn't work out. It really does go full circle. And I really want to affirm everyone in this info session that you don't need to be perfect. Writing a grant, applying for TAC funding or any funding of any sort is not about perfection. It's about just making sure that you are bringing the essence of your project into this application and so that it is able to be visible and felt. And what is the impact that you're trying to have on the city, right? You're not just applying and thinking, yeah, this is it. You're applying and you're thinking, how will this enrich Toronto's landscape? And what can I share with people from my artistic lens? And what can I collaborate with people on as well sometimes? So I just wanted to affirm you. You don't need to be perfect. So let's talk about artist pay. This is very important. Artists deserve to be paid, all right? Whether you are doing a tiny, tiny show for 20 people, or whether you're doing a grand production, whether you're running a festival, whether you're facilitating a workshop, you do deserve to be paid. Whether you're creating new work and you're going to exhibit it. For this example, I really wanted to make sure that everybody is aware of what CADA is, the Canadian Assembly of Dance. So the Canadian Alliance of Dance Artists. And so they put out CADA rates. CADA helps artists, especially there's CADA East, there's CADA West, and they help make sure that artists aren't being underpaid, right? And that they feel supported in the wages that they're asking for. I just posted an example of a screenshot from their website, which showcases some of their dancer fees and the structure, like performance rates, technical dress rehearsals, rehearsal fees, things like that. So it sets the standards for dance so you don't have to undercut yourself because you do deserve to be paid fairly. And CADA updates the rates regularly. So when we consider inflation and the cost of things rising, you can trust that also CADA is monitoring that and adjusting these guidelines appropriately. I've posted the website, the CADA website, as well as a link to the fees on the slide, and Joyce should be sharing it in the chat as well. The additional thing that is really important to me that I want everyone in the info session to consider when you're taking on or you're executing a project is about your own well-being and your mental and physical health, especially as dancers within our physical health. It's said that minimum recovery time is 3 physiotherapy sessions. So when you think of doing a major gig, I'm not talking about rehearsal where you're just marking, but a major gig or multiple shows, whether you're a dancer working commercial settings. In doing this gig, can it pay for a minimum of 3 physiotherapy sessions for you to recover and get back to dancing if something happens? Now, that's something to consider. I remember oftentimes I took a lot of gigs that couldn't even pay for my recovery, but I didn't know any better. But as I got injured, as things happened, I began to realize, hey, me taking on this gig, yeah, it does pay me money, but if something happens based on the amount of time I'm investing, I can't even pay for my own recovery. And that's a hard pill to swallow. So as we move forward, I always like to talk with artists about this. Your health and your well-being is very important. And you'll find that sometimes nowadays, especially if people ask you about what your rates are, feel free to explain to them about minimum recovery time and justifying your rate, and know that you deserve to be paid properly because it's your body you are working with as a vehicle, and everyone deserves to be respected. A little meme for everybody. And then we told all the dancers, we can't pay you, but it'll be great exposure. Say no to exposure dollars. Don't do it. You don't need to do it. All right. So make sure that you're listening to yourself. Make sure you're listening to your body. Make sure that you respect what your needs are. All right. You've got this. I believe in you. And I believe that through the process of engaging with different funding bodies, you'll learn a lot more, especially about how to communicate your artistic processes and what's important to you as you navigate the community. I'd also like to remember and say out loud that these funding bodies, including Toronto Arts Council, we are responsible to the communities that we work and we live in. So that's why program managers like myself are accessible. We do like to hear from you. We want to know what works, what doesn't work. We'd like to know what your ideas are. And we like to be able to assist when we have capacity because we also do have administrative work, but we are responsive to you because we are public facing and we are engaged. And we are artists in the community. I am a dancer and I resonate with you. And that's why I'm here today, being able to speak on these topics because I speak from personal experience dancing across the city of Toronto and abroad as well. So I want to say thank you very much for listening. We're gonna move into our Q&A period, where I'm gonna take any questions, comments, concerns, ideas. And if you'd like to reach out to me, my email is in the corner of this slide, and Joyce can put it in the chat. It's Tafiya, Tafiya, at torontoarts.org. All right. My name is, once again, Tafiya Itiaba-Bayah. I'm the dance program manager here at Toronto Arts Council. And my email is tafiya@torontoarts.org. All right. So thank you for listening. I really appreciate your ears and your attention. I'd like to move into the Q&A period right now. And oh, thank you. Yeah, of course. I'd like to be able to support people as best as I can. So I make sure that everybody can hear me properly with my enunciation.